just a couple bad weather fans representing New York, talking all things sports. Man, what could go wrong? We got Alex, who's a fan of the Knicks, and Mike of the Nets. The yin-yang of the tri-state, place your bets on the Yankees, Giants, Mets, or Jets. Yeah, you should listen if it's sparking your interest. If you made a vow to your team, don't break it. Bad weather fans is the relation.
Jerome Williams, the Junkyard Dog, 9-year NBA veteran. And Jerome, when I was doing my research, getting ready for this interview, which we're both super psyched about, saw you were born May 10th, which is my birthday. I'm 1983, but as so we got May 10th. We got May 10th in common. But as an official, I'm a Nets fan, but as an official person that's always rooting for the Knicks to lose, no offense for those times you were there, I saw you were born on the day that was the exact day of the last Knicks championship. And that just like, I couldn't get over that. May 10th,
so you're the jinx.
1973.
You're the jinx, Jerome. You're the jinx.
Hey, listen, you gotta zero in on these dates and times because there was major things happening. People don't understand. The powers of the universe was colliding. It was like, we got to make this Knick player be, great. So you got to know what's happening right now. Got to know.
So before you became a Knick, you broke our hearts though in 2001. That series, I have to get there first before we get to your Knick days. That pretty much ended the 90s Knicks. I know it wasn't the 90s anymore, but that was the last hurrah for that squad. Ewing was already gone. They won 48 games. The Knicks were the 4 seed, the Raptors the 5 seed. You actually had 2 of our guys on your team with Childs and Oakley as well. Take us through that series, and you were able to win it in 5. It was the best of 5 series. Basically a game 7 in the Garden. You guys came into the Garden and won. Vince Carter took over. Take us through that whole series in that world.
Okay, so let's go back to 1996. Okay, I'm a diehard Knick fan. The Knicks have 3 picks. They got 3 picks.
Yep.
And Oakley's getting old. And they said, we got to have some of the top power forwards in the league. Now, I didn't say that. The Knicks said that. They said, JYD, if you're available, we're drafting you. Period. Like, you're our guy. I think they had like pick 15, 16, 17, something like right there. First round, right? Because I was supposed to be a lottery pick. Get to the pick. They start chanting John Wallace in the Garden. And I'm saying to myself, Knick fans starting to chant, right? So they picked John Wallace.
To be fair, he fell too. He was supposed to be a top pick as well, and he was a very popular player, Syracuse, the whole 9. Yeah.
Hey, and shout out to my man J-Dub. That's my guy, right? Yeah. he played with me with the Pistons, but there again, right? The facts are the facts, and I should have been that pick. Just a fact. So now let's go to the
and the Knicks also, they had 18, 19, and 21. They picked John Wallace, Walter McCarty, and Dante Jones, who never played. And they passed on you. Yeah. Go ahead.
So what are we talking about right now?
Right.
Those are facts and stamped in Knicks legendary, whatever you want to call it. So
long line of those, yes.
Long line of the wrong move right there. But when it came down to me as a player wanting to be a Knick and then having to go the route that I was going in terms of I went to Detroit, then trade to Toronto. Now we're playing against the Knicks with these picks that basically didn't pan out, didn't work out. And now I'm looking at them like, yeah, you passed up on me. Now you're going to realize that was a bad move. Because you have Marcus Camby. You got the number 2 pick.
Right.
In the draft. He's supposed to carry you to the promised land. Couldn't do it. Right?
Right. It's true.
I'm just stating fact that Marcus Camby's my guy. He took care of me in the NCAA. So, at the end of the day, we all gonna get ours.
It's true.
That was a 5-game series, so you had multiple games to try to do it. and we had to end it in Game 5 in the Garden.
Was it
And
sweet
so
to
the series was just, me looking at that team and saying, hey, their strengths included Larry Johnson. I was a diehard Larry Johnson fan growing up, him playing for UNLV, him and Stacey Young. Those were my guys. So Allen Houston, former Piston, right? Sharpshooter, left Detroit, goes to New York. Like the league was so connected, and I'm just saying to myself, now you had Charles Oakley now with the Raptors with us. And he's got a point to prove. So you got all these interconnections that are going on. And we had a young star in Vince Carter who was trying to prove himself and get the Raptors to the next level. And, I'm getting ready to go into free agency. So as long as I do my job, I don't really have nothing to lose. But it was those kind of nuggets that I think propelled us in the end. It's on a personal note, just because I was saying to myself, the Knicks had 3 picks, and I had to sit there with people that I knew, didn't have what I had. Not to say that they weren't to be drafted, because they were all special players, but I knew I was special. I knew I had what it took to make it in this league long term, and then I proved it, in my career.
What was it for you then, being with Oak and him just in Toronto, like those moments? I can't even imagine what he's saying, because how he's feeling like we have to win this series, like just the conversations that you and Oakley had going back to the Garden, and him being a beloved Knick at the time, being like, I mean, it must have been surreal for you then, feeling those memories you're talking about from the 96 draft. And then here's Charles Oakley, who is, cemented in Knicks history.
And Childs too, yeah.
And Childs, Chris too. Just coming back to the Garden, those conversations with him, and that experience must have been a whirlwind for him as well.
It was. And both of those guys still referred New York as their city, as, their spot. And Charles Oakley specifically, playing at Georgetown, going to watch Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley in games at the Garden, that made me a Knicks fan. Because the Big East tournaments were there, and basketball Mecca and all those things. So Charles Oakley had a huge influence on my career, just from his work ethic, his no-nonsense attitude in practice, in games. I mean, I never forget, my first game in Detroit, in Toronto, we're at a shoot around, and he goes out before our team goes out to shoot around because the other team is exiting, slaps another power forward straight in the face, gets suspended for the game. And now I'm starting forward for the Toronto Raptors. And I'm like, what just happened? Oh, yeah. Oh, just slapped the mess out of such and such. I'm like, oh, my goodness.
That sounds like him.
This is where I'm at right now. This is what we doing.
Sink or swim, right? Yeah.
Sink or swim, and no, but he was a great teammate, cooked some of the best meals in the history of player get-togethers. We didn't see, back in the day, Oak made it a point that we didn't go out to restaurants. Oh, no, we go to the crib. And I mean, it's laid out like a restaurant. Like, wow, we're not going to a restaurant. Oh, no, we're getting home cooking. Somebody's mom is cooking, Oak is cooking, and these are the camaraderies that were building bonds and team chemistry back in the day when I was playing. A lot of these guys now, they go to a different club that,
cameras are everywhere, phones are out, and all the things. Yeah, it's a different world.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it was strange also back then. You played for Lenny Wilkins in Toronto, and then with the Knicks in the half a year that he was with the Knicks, or that year, he was only there for half a year, even if I don't know if he made it a half year. Was it weird seeing Lenny Wilkins at both stages? And when he was with you in the Knicks, did you kind of think he was done? Where you're like, Lenny's a little bit like halfway out the door, or Was it
Oh
he
no,
was into it?
Lenny still had a lot of legs left.
Uh-huh.
See, one thing about the older heads in terms of the types of teams Lenny did well with was
Mhm.
veteran type teams. So if you give a
Mhm.
Lenny Wilkins veteran players like we had on the Knicks and they're healthy, you see a top team, a top 3-4 team in the East at that time. We had the talent to be top 3-4 minimum, and then injuries are what plague a lot of teams like ours because we had a Penny Hardaway who was on his last leg, Allen Houston battling his injuries, and now you couple that with a few other knickknacks here and there with Tim Thomas and other play. Those are the kind of things that kind of derail a great situation that we had in New York. But I still cherish the moment. It was a great experience being a Knick, and those are some good teammates,
Mm.
especially for me as a player. And back in 2005, I'll never forget, we had a $98 million salary cap in
Wow.
2005. Stop it. We much respect to Dolan.
Yeah.
he was he was he was passing out the ducats back in the day, and that was that was before Jaylen Brown was making history,
Right, right, right,
and
right,
soon
right.
to be Jason Tatum. He had
It's like somebody
98.
please take my money, win games, take my money.
Yeah, so 20 years ago,
Yeah.
almost soon to be next year, 20 years ago, it was serious business. And the Knick organization, they had to make new rules in the NBA because of what Dolan did in 2005.
That's crazy. So you were traded a couple times, and when you came to the Knicks, you came in that Jamal Crawford deal.
That's right.
And then you were actually the first person to get amnestied from the Knicks in their history, right? I believe. And then you decided to retire. Was it did you retire? You're just like, oh, I don't want to start a new situation. I'm happy in New York. And I believe you worked for MSG after that, right? A little bit. You did
I
a little work
did.
for me. I
I
remember
did.
that. I could have sworn that. I was trying to
I
look it
was
up
a
and I'm like, I don't see any record of it, but like I remember that.
I was first and only player ever amnesty by the Knicks.
Yeah.
And long story short, that deal was vetoed by Allen Houston because he had that deal on his table first. And the way that deal worked with the Knicks was the players that they offered it to, myself and Allen Houston, they offered front office jobs.
Mm.
For front office jobs as well as coaching jobs. And I got the third option, which you just mentioned, an MSG job. So it was a different type of amnesty because it was an amnesty off of, hey, these are the players I respect enough to pay and want them to stick around.
Mm.
Wow.
So I didn't take the front office job. I didn't take the coaching job, and I ended up taking the MSG job, which was also leading me to the commentator role that our, Clyde the Glide Frazier was like, JYD, I'm going to hand you these keys. And I was like, man, I got to keep seeing you on this TV decked out. So I went on to executive produce a TV show called Make It Hot. And it was a great run. We actually picked up a huge sponsor the next year, but I moved out to Vegas. And when I moved out to Vegas to be around my mom and dad, obviously all my MSG stuff came to an end.
And then you referenced from before that 2001 season and your roommate Allen Iverson playing him in the playoffs in that epic 7-game series, which as a diehard Net fan, the Nets made the finals the next year, and I vividly remember that 2001 series, and I think you guys were on the short end of it, but I don't think in NBA history that 7-game series gets enough recognition for just how crazy that was. And Vince with the shot, like, just take us through that moment there, watching that in the air. And then, like, to me, one of the most underrated best of 7 series in the history of the league.
Well, man, you said it. I mean, back in 450-point games with AI and Vince Carter, leading up to that game 6 in Toronto when I dunked on Mount Matumbo, it was going down. It was the Georgetown frenzy of, battling outside of just the battle that we were having in the playoffs. So let me just state that. Huge shout out to Dikembe. We get in that game 7. AI is not having his best game. We're containing them. We're up. We are in control of that game, and they knew we were the better team. But as we know, home court is a huge plus in the NBA. And they got a few stops at the end, went on a little run, and basically we weren't getting the calls. They were. The game comes down to these last few possessions. We get a final look at it. And in that moment, the thing that hit my thought process was, I wonder how the trip to graduation for Vince Carter is going to play out in this story. Is it going to be coulda, woulda, shoulda for the rest of his career? Or is it going to be it didn't matter? And unfortunately, it was first, segue into that. It was always, what if he had not went to graduation and been traveling around that whole day of the game that would have cemented him in NBA history. And Vince always, huge shout out to him. Much respect as my teammate. I was behind him either way, whether he went to graduation or not. But I know in terms of his thought process as a young player, I know he was thinking like any young player, I'm going to be getting in these moments for the rest of my career. What is there to worry about? Like game 7, oh, that's nothing. Well, next year I'll be back. And as you all know, it doesn't always go that way. Once you get your shot, your opportunity, it's, especially with a team like we had. That team was one of the most talented teams when you look at top to bottom, the bench, the veterans, the young legs. I mean, these teams today are kind of the winning teams are built like that. You got to be 10 deep. We were 10 deep. Some would even say 11, based on what shooter you want to go with, whether Tracy Murray, Dell Curry, like we were deep. And the Keon Clarks, the Chris Childs, like you mentioned, myself, that's a strong starter like bench that's really able to start in the league. And for us to lose that game on Vince's last shot definitely sent ripples through the organization in a way that, they were ready to, double down and say, okay, this is how we're gonna compete in the next 3 to 4 years. And they signed all those guys, myself included, in that offseason. But then that injury bug hit, and now that team isn't in the history books the way, we would have probably won it. But at the end of the day, that's what happened. Those are the kind of things that, as you mentioned, that last shot, right? Just off the back of the rim, it's a matter of inches.
Yeah.
That
which is
careers go a different way.
It's true. And it's I've seen all the documentaries and I remember living through it. I'm 39, so I remember living through all that. And it's crazy how I know fans are irrational. I know I'm irrational at times. I know Mike is always irrational. And there's times where like you want someone to blame, and you're going to blame the graduation. That's not why he missed the shot. You know what I mean? It was just he wanted to do something that meant something to him, and he hit shots all game. He just missed that one, which is just, it happens. He's Vince Carter. He's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Not even Michael Jordan. So I understand that, and it's it's crazy that happened, and and that led to the downfall of Vince in Toronto, and then he ends up getting traded to the Nets. I know you were kind of around that year. I believe you got traded before him, but how was the feel in Toronto after that, and seeing everybody starting to turn on Vince? Was that kind of awkward, and then seeing him land on his feet in New Jersey?
Well, it was first the next year. I was there the whole time, and that year Vince ended up only playing about half the season due to his knee injury, right? And I remember the last 20 games of the season, we had to win 16 of those games to make it into the playoffs. And it was a crazy stretch that we had to do it. And I mean, this is without Vince Carter, our franchise, like, everybody gave us odds of like negative, 0.00, and we ended up winning those games, getting in the playoffs, battling for Detroit, right? Ended up winning 2 games that pushed that series to 5, and ended up losing in Detroit, like, with them having to really work to beat us. And they went on to win the championship. Right. So it's like, this is the kind of team we had. It was probably a like underrated, not talked about team. We pushed the champions to game 5 in Detroit. And again, similar thing. We're up, but they got home court. They ended up pushing it out and winning in that end of that game. But now they go on to beat the Lakers. And it's
the anniversary
those kind of moments
too.
that like you're like saying to yourself, what if? Because to your point, then the following year, now the team is looking at our team differently because our leader is, not, what they wanted it to be.
Right.
So at that point, it's about breaking it up and figuring out what you're gonna do with a lot of these assets. And since I was one of those assets that they didn't want to get rid of, but they had to appease other parts of the framework of their organization, you got to go with who's got a lot of value. And I was a player that had a lot of value at that time.
Yeah, it's kind of wild because I'm sure your perspective of Raptor fans, I don't think get enough credit for just how loud they are, how passionate they are, and how much they love their franchise. So I always thought it was, as a Net fan, I was like, oh, Vince Carter's here. This is crazy. Just how much animosity and like kind of that fractured relationship there really was there. And the more I read and like learn about it, are you surprised to see that Vince and Toronto had such kind of a messy breakup, considering how much love there is for basketball there, and how amazing Vince was in his career?
Well, I really chalk it up to that was the young Vince Carter. The young Vince Carter was dealing with the injury for the first time. And in the NBA, one of the things that I used to tell Vince is that the injury that that's kind of plaguing you because they didn't have any structural damage or anything really damaging or that showed up in his knee, right? I was like, man, we were dealing with this at Georgetown in college. Like basically it's a tendonitis, a soreness, a pain that does not allow you to jump at the heights that Vince was jumping. And he was trying to be the Vince Carter that everyone knew and not realizing as he gets older every year, you're going to have some, decrease in what you're capable of on a nightly basis. Right. And that was his first time experiencing that. So I feel like he was adjusting to that. And that was his way of, dealing with it. And one of the things that, to your point, made it difficult for him to have that great relationship with the fans in Toronto at that time was when he said, as being, AKA Vince Carter Air Canada, saying that he wasn't going to dunk anymore. when he said that, that's when the fans were like, what do you mean? That's what you do. And then when he started dunking again in New Jersey, that just, that's like salt on the wound. So that's my perspective. I love Vince either way, that's my dog. So, but when I'm looking at the fans, I love them too. So I kind of understand like what they saw, what he said, how they took it, and then now he's gone. And again, this is the furthest the franchise had ever been. They don't know when they're going to get a Kawhi Leonard and, and Kyle Lowry to take them to the promised land. They don't know.
Right.
They have to go through Chris Bosh and,
and he left too. Yeah. Yeah. No. And probably seeing Vince Carter land with Jason Kidd and starting to flourish and hit the outside shot more and getting those dunks on like Alonzo Mourning and things like that. I can see that. And do you think him playing with somebody like Jason Kidd really helped him come into his own as a different kind of a player? Obviously, Jason Kidd helps everybody, but what do you think about that? Yeah,
man, listen. I mean, Vince Carter and Jason Kidd, stop it. Like, what are we talking about? He said it himself. I don't know what a podcast he was on. He was like, shout out to Alvin Williams. Boogie's our guy, but he said Jason Williams is another level. Like, and he's right. Like, how many guys that run the floor and athletic has Jason Kidd made better? And you're talking to me, telling me you have someone who can hit a jump shot with that in Vince Carter? Stop it. I mean, I'm shocked they didn't do more than they did. You had Richard Jefferson and Vince,
right?
Not to mention Kenyon Martin and all the rest of those guys. So it was definitely something that I was like, wow, that's a team.
Talking about rubbing salt in Mike's wounds right now as a Nets fan, hearing about that.
It was. I mean, the talent and the
I saw the tear coming down his face. Like,
just bring me back to being 19, 20 years old, and I'll cry myself to bed. No, I'm just kidding. But you talked about Jerome being a diehard Knick fan. So was it? And if you be honest here, the difference between like growing up, like saying you're a Knick fan. What was the experience like at the Meadowlands playing the Nets on the road? Because I was one of like the 3,000 people there, but in some of those games, like 96 to 2000, like what was the experience like going on the road and playing the Nets when you're 8 miles away from the Garden, but had to feel like a very different world?
It was a different world, but you got to understand, like, we were in the best situation. Why? Because you guys had Stephon Marbury. And I mean that in the best way, with all due respect. But Stephon always wanted to be a Knick. So every time we played the Nets, we knew if Steph got 30 to 40 and the Nets lost, it was a good night. Because if he would have gotten 25 and dished out 15 assists, the Nets probably would have beat us every time. But by him getting that 30 to 40, because how much he wanted to make sure he let the Knicks know I should be wearing that jersey. You guys were in a no-win situation because you're playing basically, in our eyes, 6 against 4. We just had to play the game right. And stick to the game plan.
Which is really interesting too, because you're talking like Jason Kidd brought that element of he's not going to score as much, but I'll make all these ancillary pieces, all these guys around me better. And then, his scoring obviously was down, but his assists were up and other players were making shots and benefiting off what he could contribute.
There you go. And then your team started seeing the other ends of the playoffs.
Exactly.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
Call it a conspiracy theory. That's the way I see it.
Right. No one could take that away from you. That's for sure. Actually, the other thing that I found funny was that you played in Toronto with Dell Curry, and he always famously had his kids around with Seth and Steph. Did you see any funny like family interactions with Steph and Seth with Dell around, or did you ever see them around? Any funny stories regarding that?
Come on, man. I give you the best story, the best, Dell Curry, Steph Curry story ever. All right. So I remember I was always, one of the first guys in practice, one of the last guys to leave. Like that was just JYD. So one day after practice, I see Steph and Seth over there kind of, sitting down, waiting. Seth was sitting. He wasn't getting up, right? Steph was up and he was kind of like bouncing the ball, till he wanted to shoot, but he wasn't allowed to shoot. His dad wouldn't let him shoot until like all the players had exited the building. Like it was almost like the rule, like, hey, you're in a, professional, facility and these guys got to get their work in. So I remember, I was done with my stuff, but he was still waiting for me to leave. And I'm like, bro, you can shoot. And I said, matter of fact, you want me to rebound for you? So he's like, yeah. I'll, rebound, right? And I was like, okay. So I kind of switch over to like coach mode or whatever. And I was like, all right, what are we doing? What drill are you trying to do, right? I know his dad's a shooter, so I know he probably done some drill. Steph is going to say to me, okay, coach, I'm going to make 5 in a row from each spot on the 3-point line. And man, like, you see how I'm looking at you right now? Like, I was like, and I'm saying to myself, oh, don't look like that, right? Don't.
How old was he at the time? How old was he?
He's like 13 years old, right? So I'm saying to myself, 5 in a row. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do to myself? I'm gonna be here. I'll be here 2 hours. But I was like, but I can't show him that I'm thinking he can't do what he just said, right? So I'm like, all right, that's what we doing? Okay, let's go. So I get the ball back, and I'm like, all right, I'm feeding him these balls. Whoop, whoop, he catching them. Wow, wow. And I'm like, 3 in a row, boy, no, snap, we might got some here. Wow, 5 in a row. First 5. This hadn't taken any shots. Comes out, first 5, bang. I'm like, this is incredible, right? He gets to the next spot. Now we're on the wing. I'm like, all right. I'm hitting him. Wow. 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 I'm like, what in the world? 5 in a row. Now he's at 10 in a row. And I'm saying to myself, oh, this can't be happening right now. He gets to the top of the key, right? Back irons the first one. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. He about to makes 5 in a row from that. I'm like, he missed 1 shot. Now he's only got 2 other spots left. The boy missed 1 shot out of all that.
Wow.
So he went 25 for 27, but he was 5 in a row.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, you got pros out here that can't make 5 in a row right now. And you did it without warming up. He ain't take no shots. So I'm like, what? So like I go to Dell like right after that. I was like, man, what? Now I know you best shooter on the team. So his dad is the best shooter, right? So I'm like, but bro, your son, I'm like saying to myself, he I don't want to say he can shoot better than you, but he knocking on some doors here and he's 12. I was like, where you got him playing at? Dale? And he's like, yeah, he plays up in AAU, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, for real? And I'm like over here on the side, like taking notes. Like, what you saying? What drills you doing there? Man, I don't have any kids, right? I got something I'm thinking about. But when I do, brother, we got to do what you doing right now. I'm like, what you saying?
What are you feeding them? Yeah. Right.
What are you doing? And I mean, it was like, this is and after every weekend after that, I was like, what did he do this weekend? Oh man, he scored 40 on his kids, this and that. He just and that's the legend, right? And that was
wow.
So when he made it, we always hug when we see each other. And he remembers I was his first rebounder, his first pro rebounder and passer. So when you talk to him next, you say, "Hey, did Junkyard help you with your game?" Hey,
You're responsible for it all. You're responsible
I'm
for everything.
responsible, man. I'm taking some
amazing.
credit.
That's amazing.
Great parenting and great coaching. They did an awesome job with both their sons.
And just the way the game's evolved now with all the threes and the shooting. Do you envy? Because I know you weren't a scorer and you were incredibly gifted in the role you played, and we went into Detroit knowing to earn the minutes, to earn the respect from the Mahorns and the veterans there. Do you look at this era and wish you could be involved? I know the money now is bonkers. So that's a different question, but like involved in this style of NBA, do you think you would have liked it, or are you happy you were in the era you were in?
Man, I'm definitely not going to be one of those guys who's going to cry over spilled milk and start talking about how much money I could have made. I could have made a lot of money for sure, but I give it up to these guys in this era. Respect their games, respect what they're doing. And I take it another step further and I say, man, what can I do to help this next generation, right? And how I do that is through taking the notes that I had back then with a lot of those players and passing that information forward. Like if you look up my son right now on Instagram, DADOG, the dog, Jeremiah, on all your people on podcasts,
all right,
to just put that in their Instagram and follow this kid and just tell me if he reminds you of anybody. Just reminds you of anybody, you ain't got there. I'm not gonna throw any names out there because I don't want nobody saying, well, you said so, just come up with your own thing, right? If you like what you see, give them a follow. But seriously, I would not want to play in this era because of social media and the things a lot of these players have to deal with now, today, just knowing what I had to deal with back in the day that we thought was like, whoa, this is rough. Now, oh my goodness, it's just, the game was fun. I enjoyed the fans. I enjoyed interactions, but cell phones were just coming around.
Right.
You had a cell phone that could take a picture. That was, that was doing something back then, right?
The 30-second grainy video, right? Like one of those.
2003, we were starting to make a little transition into some, megapixel cameras that could take a photo that, was better than a Polaroid.
Yeah, right.
So like now I'm like, bro, we were doing something different. Now you got high def. They can see the sweat and the booger on your nose.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And everybody wants a picture and everything else. So
yeah,
I think my era was a great era for that time. Now these kids are dealing with something different. NIL. Could you imagine
making millions?
Allen Iverson in NIL?
Nuts.
Like we would be ruined.
Right.
Like that, the whole dynamic changes when you can pay a kid.
Yeah.
Like I saw a kid the other day get $2 million. We don't even know his name. Like, brother, he's really good. Is he? I ain't never heard of him.
Right. Now you don't even have to make it to the pros to make millions. Just get to college and you might get something. That's
get to college. We're all Big East team.
Right. Yeah.
How much are we worth? And we
like
are
Melo in Syracuse. How much was he worth? And that 1 year with the title, like how much would he have made? Jeez.
Come on. And we're we're launching, the Jordan 11s. Me and AI, we launched that shoe. Like these are like groundbreaking moments of like that can change the course of whole careers.
Sure.
If it happened today.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm just saying, like, I know I'm good in my era because I probably wouldn't have been able to deal with what's happening today.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know now. There you
funny.
go.
And they called you the Junkyard Dog for a good reason. You were dirty things. You cleaned up the glass. You got all the loose balls. You got all the taps. Everything. You're kind of like Josh Hart on the Knicks right now. Do you compare yourself? If you see anybody in yourself on the Knicks, is it Josh Hart, or is there anybody else around the league that you compare yourself
Man,
to?
it's a mix between Josh Hart and Julius Randle.
Okay.
Definitely a little more Josh Hart, but Julius because he's a rebound, that boy can get it in. But Josh Hart, shout out to Josh, went to Sidwell in DC. My son is actually practicing up there with Sidwell now, and he's going in the 8th grade. So, but Josh, the focus that he plays with on both ends, a top rebounding guard does a little bit of everything, and the heart and tenacity he plays with on defense, bar none is a dog. He is a dog, and I love it because when you pair him with the Jalen Brunson, and shout out to Rick because that was my teammate in Chicago. So I know the stock that he comes from. I know the focus that his dad had him in back
Okay.
then. And again, this is another father-son duo of these guys understanding, they're basically when you graduate from the NBA and you have opportunities to take your son and say, oh, this is what I learned from this player, and I give it to your son. Oh, this is what I learned from this player, give it to your son. This is like the secret sauce that no one else knows about. And I've been fortunate enough to have coached a lot of pros because I was at Finley Prep, for those years. And I had #1 pick Anthony Bennett and guys like Chris Wood with the Lakers, other guys like, that I personally coached, and Kelly Oubre. Shout out to O'Shea Brissett that just won his first championship with the Boston Celtics this year. Rashard Vaughn, these players that, basically day in and day out were able to take what I was giving them and then turn it into NBA careers is just one of the best things. And I see that repeating itself with a lot of father-son duos in the NBA right now.
Wow. So, all right. So now I was going to ask you one more. We had a Twitter question, but I wanted to now you brought up Jalen Brunson, that you saw him as a kid. Do you have any fun Jalen Brunson stories? It's more relatable to the Knicks fans listening. So,
man, he was so young. I mean, he was almost in diapers, toddlerville when he was coming in the Chicago Bulls locker room. But he was there. He was soaking it all up. He used to sit in his dad's cubicle after games and just little toddler, wasn't saying nothing. His dad told him to stay right there. Don't move. Don't be running around. And that's what he did. But when you see him now, you're like, bro, I know you was going to be great because you could follow instructions and B, you're soaking all this in as a kid. He goes on to Villanova and just crushes it. And then to have his teammates now playing alongside him with the Knicks, what bigger dream in a kid's life and a person's life? You win a championship in college and then have those same guys playing with you in the NBA. I would have loved to have played with AI during my NBA career at some point. We came close because he was signed. I could have had the opportunity to play with Philly when I hit free agency. But at the time, there was a lot of suitors, so I took the one that felt best to me, but it was under consideration just because of AI.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. So, okay. So, we have 3 Twitter questions. They're going to be really quick. So Nick, he's at Nickinator _ Who was your favorite teammate in the league to play with?
Favorite teammate, man, this is tough because I had a lot of friends, but Moochie Norris.
Really?
Moochie Norris, right? He's first to Allen Houston. Allen Houston comes right underneath him.
With the afro or without the afro? Was he?
Definitely with the afro. You got to go afro Moochie, right? Basically, Moochie and I, when growing up in DC, we used to go to Dr. Carr's gym. And I just remember catching the subway from one end, he's catching the subway from the other end. and we were on the same team. Coach Dr. Carr, he wrote the NBA rookie transition, used to put us on the same team, and we used to beat pros. And that was our MO. And we were in like, junior college, right out of high school. He was at a no-name junior college. I was at a no-name junior college. We weren't at Georgetown and none of Auburn's and all that. Nope. We were just basically on the streets playing. And we ended up being teammates with the Knicks. And that was just the best time because we could reminisce those stories of struggle, the stories of not having, the stories of not being, on a top Division I college program. And these other guys didn't have those kind of stories because we really came from like rags to riches type of.
And now you're at the Garden, like that's.
And now we're at the Garden
Yeah,
together,
yeah.
rocking high socks together. And he comes in the game and the whole Garden saying, "Moo!" Like
Yeah.
it was great.
He was a fan favorite for that short time, that's for sure. You
He
too.
was. He was. We were both battling for our fan favoritism.
Yeah, right. All right. So at the Knicks recap, what was the hardest player matchup that you had?
Hardest player matchup at the time for me was definitely, I would say, Tim Duncan.
Sounds hard. Yeah.
Tim, Mr. Fundamental. The one thing that I think I'm gonna say another player was harder just because Tim was nice, right? Tim wasn't talking trash. Tim was just going to give you 25 and 10, 12, that's just Tim. Kevin Garnett, you might get a little talking with that, a little bit of, mustard and ketchup on the side. But definitely a lot of screaming, yelling, and intensity that was hard to compete because Kevin didn't talk trash. He didn't talk trash to me. He might talk trash to other people later on, but early on, Kevin, he was just about his business and being so intense that if anybody, he was talking to himself. He would talk trash to himself. And it was like, man, what kind of guy talks trash to him? You ain't nothing. Like, what are you talking to? Me? What? That was some tough competition when you like, man, he's cussing himself out. That's interesting. I ain't never seen that before. So,
but it fits. It fits.
Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan, those are my two guys. That were 6'11", athletic, fundamental, top power forwards in this game that we had to face.
Yeah, probably ever. Two of the top ever.
Yeah.
And last one, and this is from at Triple M. What's up? Junkyard Dog, 2004-2005 season was a roller coaster. Young players and vets. How was it losing Coach Lenny after the mediocre start?
Oh man, it was terrible. Man, it was bad because, I had been coached by Coach Lenny, and I knew what he could do with veteran teams, and this was a veteran team. And at the time, we were in the playoffs. They just said we could be doing better. Well, we made the change. We ended up doing worse and then missing the playoffs by like a game and a half or something like that. Very minimal. That I know with Coach Lenny, we would have, kept that thing, going. And I know, shout out to Herb Williams. I'm not saying it was his fault. Like he did
intern
dealt
thrown into it.
He was dealt a deck of cards that he played on. But Coach Lenny Wilkins was a Hall of Famer and a Hall of Fame coach. And I just feel like if they would have given him the remainder of the year and then made a change in the off season with the players that he had, we would have made that work. Because we're veterans. Like he knew me, he knew guys in that locker room like that could play. And no one was cashing it in. So it wasn't like he lost a team. We were in the playoffs when he got like, and it was a shock. It was like a downer because nobody was like, hey, we don't want this coach.
Right.
You know,
Winning
he
his
had to
coach
respect her
ever.
a lot.
Like, yeah.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
not? Yeah.
yeah. He's not the coach that guys would be trying to get rid of. Let me just make that perfectly clear. He still
Okay.
gets calls to this day, like, thanks, coach. Appreciate you. Like, he's getting those kind of calls.
Mm. Interesting.
Good questions, man. Keep them Twitter questions coming.
Yeah, we
Dog
got
pound is alive. That's what I'm talking about.
we got a passionate fan base for the podcast, so we appreciate it. And I was worried when you're talking about Jalen Brunson, because he scares me to death, because I'm fearing the Knick title coming. I thought you were going to say, yeah, when he was 5 years old, he was draining threes too, and I was like, oh no, here it comes, I am screwed. But no, that's amazing stuff. Alex and I are both fathers, both have young sons too, so hearing this and all the passion that you give for your family, and sharing all of these amazing stories, well, we can't appreciate it enough. And you're always welcome here on Bad Weather Fans. We really appreciate being generous with your time and just reminiscing on some of these amazing stories from your playing career, and your perspective has truly been incredible, so thank you.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on the show, man. And before I go, I got to say this, okay? To all the fans out there watching this podcast, especially the dads, speak to the dads. In speaking to your sons and daughters, there's a lot of Caitlin Clarks out here, make sure that you keep God first. But not only that, you always speak life and positivity into your kids, and you never let them speak bad about themselves. There's power in the words and the tongues and the things that we say. So you got to constantly speak life over your kids and what they're doing or what you see them doing. I've coached a lot of AAU basketball, and parents, and they come to me and they say, "Little Bobby can't." Whoa, what did you just say? Don't speak. Little Bobby can't do anything around me. Little Bobby can, period. You never be an NBA. Oh, stop it. Because my son and these kids, like they get told every day,
Yeah.
you can do this. That's what I was told. And I believed it, and I made it happen because it was constantly being spoken into over my life. And that's all I do with my kids. I speak it over. So you do not, as a parent, ever say what your kid can't do, period. If I just say anything else, that's what the dog pound is leaving you with. Shout outs to all the fans out there. I appreciate y'all, and I wouldn't be the Junkyard Dog without you.
Well, thank you so much, Jerome. I really appreciate your time. It was an honor, for real. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.